There's a huge benefit to being focused early on. A large enterprise, a bank, an insurer, a government organization, they're just not going to trust your platform, or they're not going to give you a budget unless you're best in class, absolutely best in the world at solving that specific problem. And this is how platforms grow, right? You build trust with the customers and you're able to solve more and more. And then you figure out the adjacent problems, you build that into the platform.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, wherever you are. Thank you very much for joining the Boredom Club today. My name is Yossi Garmazi, and I'm joined also by a good friend of mine, Amado Vargas. Amado.
Hi, everyone. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for joining us today.
So today we have the pleasure of hosting none other than Steve Leightell, the lead investor of cybersecurity at Georgian. Among his investments, you could find some of the most promising cyber companies out there, and actually some of our previous guests. You could find the founders of Ireland, Cyera, and even Armis that just got acquired for something like $7.75 billion by none other than ServiceNow. So, Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Yossi and Amato. Great to be with you.
The pleasure is ours. So, Steve, I thought to start with a very interesting question because you spent most of your career working closely with growth cyber companies and also softwares, from sales to IBM, business development. But what operating lessons from your earlier roles most directly shape how you evaluate cyber companies today at Georgia?
I spent roughly, I guess now the first third of my career in sales and then biz dev roles, went through a couple of acquisitions. Thinking about what I learned in those days and applying it to the most recent 2/3 of my career, I would say, looking back, you really try and simplify things. So it's a bit of a cliche, but I look for great teams. And that's an easy cheat question because good teams, really good cheat teams, they really choose the right markets. They tend to build great products. When you find a good team or you build a good team, nurture it, expand on it, and stay with it. The team that I've been with, the Georgian, I've been with them for 26 years now. So it's been going well, sticking with it.
Absolutely. And the list of investments is unparalleled. But something very interesting also about Georgia, that it isn't just a capital provider because there are many VCs out there. Since you have dedicated an AI lab, right, that builds with your portfolio, but can you share for the audience a little bit about this initiative and the gap that you originally identified and what you tried to solve there?
So what's now known as our AI labs has been something that we've had since the beginning. Maybe a little bit of contact. George started in '08. We were a bunch of guys up in Toronto. There's 3 founders. I'm not one of them. I was with them at a previous company, joined them just after raising this fund. It was a really tough time to raise capital. We happen to be in Canada, but then and now the idea was never to invest just in Canadian companies. It was really, go and find the best companies wherever they are, the best talent. We thought about our experience as operators. All 3 founders, by the way, are software engineers. They would probably tell you they're not the best software engineers out there, but they understand it very well. But they were all entrepreneurs as well. So in those days, and I was involved in some of the fundraising at our previous company, DWL, that we sold to IBM, we really knew what good partners felt like. Insight were one of our backers there. So we sort of looked at that and then what do growth stage companies need. Then we said we can differentiate by building technical talent. So it's been an iteration from then, Yossi. We hired 2 or 3 folks who were from our network. Back then, they were just playing with sort of rules-based, predictive analytics and models. And that evolved to what we are today, which is about 25, 30 very, very deep technical folks. We have PhDs, we have full stack engineers, researchers, project managers, and they're engaging daily with our companies on, we would say, like sort of very practical application of the latest buzzword technologies, but we actually get very deep into it.
I looked in your investments over the years, and for example, you backed Island, Enterprise Browser, and Cyera, DSPM. But one thing about these 2 companies is they actually started when those categories barely existed, right? But early on, how do you distinguish from your perspective as an investor between a niche tool and a foundational platforms opportunities like Ireland, for example? Because I assume it wasn't as easy at the beginning to distinguish them from the pack.
It's true. I mean, in cyber, it's really tough to find the white space or what will become those really big platforms. We've all seen tons of market maps. I dig through them with my team every day, like the Momentum Cyber Map. I love those guys, but there's probably, I don't know, 2,000 companies on that sheet. So how do you, short of throwing darts, how do you pick the winners? So for us, going back probably of our nearly 20 years, 18, I think, years, you got to spend the time with some great people, as we've been lucky to do, get over to Israel, spend time in the US. So for us, it was, if you boil down into large markets, best team, best seed and A round investors, they tend to raise the most money the most often, and they come out of the market like a cannon. So in cyber, I always say we've been lucky or good, but you can really map these companies to that simple framework. So Cyera, you named Island, Armis, Sublime, ChainGuard, Eon, we just invested in, that's sort of cyber adjacent, incredible company. So that's a simple framework that lets us test it. We're getting pretty good at finding those companies or sort of the pattern earlier. And of course, the network effect helps. And then you have to dig in. So it's very helpful for us to really be able to think about some of the earlier deals that were more point solutions and rolled up early versus these ones that become these big platforms, right?
100%. That you mentioned Eon, we're actually going to release the episodes with Ufirel, a fascinating company with all the rack technology and the data storage in the cloud. So amazing. Georgian also recently published a research on the AI technology stack, right? And everyone talks about AI, but I was just curious, what's the most misunderstood layer of that stack among founders in today's world?
I'll probably tie it back to security. AI agents in particular, recent examples. I don't know if you have seen, I think it was called OpenClaw or ClaudeBot, not like Anthropic Claude Code, CLAWD. Lots of chatter around this. These frameworks are amazing, but there's lots of security risks that they bring forward. So, we look at it and say, amazing frameworks, great productivity, get stuff into production, but almost feels a little bit careless that some of the security is not being addressed up front. Even MCP protocol, super useful, incredible, but they didn't really address authentication or in the original designs, kind of like went back and did that after the fact. That would be one area that, again, tied to what I focus on is security companies, but of course there's AI for security and then there's security for AI.
And you actually mentioned Cloudbot, and everyone talks about all the agents out there. And I guess agents means also the cyber attacks, right? But do you see it as a new attack surface for attackers? Or could agents themselves actually could become the ultimate zero trust gatekeepers? So not necessarily.
I think it's both. I hate to answer it that way. You have a lot of pretty unsafe access to AI in enterprises. It's surprising. You sit down with CISOs, they're freaking about all this access and shadow IT problem. You should use Island, the enterprise browser that will take care of this problem for you. And, and you've got open source being pulled together kind of recklessly in some cases. ChainGuard could help here, but really being pulled into the enterprise. So there's lots of defensive solutions here within the enterprise. And then we're seeing some cool offensive sort of red teaming approaches using agents to sort of battle test all this in a continual testing method. So it's both, I would say, Yossi. I think, the thing that we worry about keeps the industry moving very quick. Exciting time, I think, to be a CISO.
You could see even in the market, all the platformization. We just saw a couple of days ago the completion of CyberArk acquisition by Palo Alto, and it's part of the platformization out there. But is the era of single problem cyber startup over, or there is still room for focus players like Sublime Security even to win at this market?
There's certainly room for focus players. I would say the single problem cyber startup is not over. We look for these large sort of center of gravity plays, but there's a huge benefit to being focused early on. So a large enterprise, a bank, an insurer, a government organization, they're just not going to trust your platform, or they're not going to give you a budget unless you're best in class, absolutely best in the world at solving that specific problem. So this is how platforms grow, right? You build trust with the customers and you're able to solve more and more. And then you figure out the adjacent problems, you build that into the platform. Very often we see this in roadmap as we're doing diligence, kind of at our BC stage. As far as Sublime, email, massive market, different subcomponents, lots of opportunity in front of Sublime, given the size of the space. But we think that team is just incredible and innovating faster than others in the market.
It's fascinating time to be in the market. It could take the whole cyber world to another level, specifically with the agents, which brings me to the next question. And my last question, actually, before I pass the mic to Amado. So a great company that we actually hosted, I think it was like 6 months ago or so, it's Cyera, that you also invested in. And Cyera actually reached a $9 billion valuation following a rapid revenue growth. And indeed, you highlighted the ability to control how autonomous agents interact with sensitive enterprise data as a breakthrough. But how do you see AI native data protection replacing legacy tools like CISOs that have struggled with for years?
Look, there's lots of good platforms out there, including those provided by the LLMs themselves. So we're talking about like there's security for AI, as we mentioned before, or security for AI focus on either security of the model itself or the safe access. I think here we're talking about how the autonomous agents interact with the data, right? This is the Cyera problem, the sensitive enterprise data. So core principles here are there's data's everywhere. Generative AI is surging, and the legacy tech just isn't adequate to protect the business, the enterprise. So I think what we would say here is the agents can take actions and access the data on their own, but Cyera treats each of those like a digital employee, and those employees need constant supervision. Then it can place the guardrails around it. So with that, they're really able to stop the agent before it sends, for example, a file to the wrong person. So it gets down to very practical stuff that can happen in the enterprise. It's a huge opportunity for Cyera. It's been incredibly well received in market. As companies adopt AI agents, those agents can't see what they shouldn't or what they're not allowed to do. So if you were at CyberSec, you heard the launch of Guardian, and it's just been an amazing market uptick for the business.
I agree, and it seems only the beginning for the DSPM's section of the cybersecurity out there. Looking forward to see what is going to be next for the company. So, Steve, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for answering all of my questions. And Amado, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yossi. Steve, touching on one of Georgian's investments, Sublime Securities. Email security is a crowded market dominated by incumbents like Mimecast and Proofpoint. When you led the $150 million round in Sublime, what about their open detection approach convinced you the incumbents were vulnerable?
Big market in email security. It really comes down to what is best protecting customer and their massively important email platform. So we do a ton of work, like all VCs do, talking to a lot of experts. In diligence, they'd evaluated the product. Sublime's, their efficacy really versus its peers was just way better. That was really highlighted. The open architecture they have, super foundational to the product, really fit our thesis. And it kind of flips the traditional approach on its head by giving a lot of transparency to the model below. So that leads the customer using the product in different ways than traditional providers. So they're able to do better investigation. Customers are able to tweak it and implement it around their own detections. So we saw a lot more flexibility there, and it just worked to be a much better customer experience. I think it's autonomous detection engineer, they call it. So really well designed for agents to reduce manual work for the customers, and then this transparency that really builds trust in the actions that's being taken.
And continue on the idea of building trust, because Georgian is a growth equity company. Looking at Georgian's 2025 AI adoption benchmarks, Georgian uses a crawl, walk, run framework, which I found very interesting. How are you helping companies move from walk to run, where AI return on investment directly drives net retention and ARR?
From the walk to run, the walking side, we really look at, we use our labs, and then we help non-native AI software companies build in just cost-effective, practical AI features or genetic solutions that's going to drive ARR. For us, it's always grounded in ARR. So you want to modernize that sort of traditional SaaS business. We look at what products can they adopt that's going to end up being things they can sell. You can look at our website. We've got some examples there, like around ClickUp. Another simple one on the crawl walk is on the go-to-market side. So we help a lot of our companies with AI productivity just from the individual all the way to the full enterprise. So this is upskilling the go-to-market team, vibe coding or vibe marketing, like pulling content together for specific targeted markets or industries or specific customer growth engine role. So we do a lot of work around that, production, sales support, and then most recently RevOps as well.
100%. And that makes perfect sense. And a small extension on that, that phase in between walk and run, you may call it a jogger. Joggers to runners, the core bottleneck, your Wave 2 report showed a 9-point shift from walkers to joggers, yet runners stayed flat at 11%. What's the single biggest bottleneck preventing joggers from crossing into that elite runner group?
For R&D, cost tech challenges of vibe coding and CIC environment is an issue. You see that sort of over and over. To build a bridge is broadly a market need that we're seeing, and then demand for AI talent. It's tough. It's tough to find. So go to market, it's easier and faster to solve, but it really amounts to new role, upskilled RevOps talent to build into these really robust vibe marketing systems. And this is where our labs engage and help scope those problems. And if it's talent, we're helping on hiring that talent as well.
And that is where Georgian comes in, helping out with the talent cultivation. Touching on vibe coding, do you see it as a permanent productivity floor or a technical debt time bomb for growth stage startups?
Both. So definitely productivity floor is higher. If you're not using these tools right now, you're moving way too slow. On the flip side, if you aren't really deliberate about how you design your architecture around it, you're going to end up with what I think people generally call slop, compounding slop. So really large code bases, nothing really hanging together. We play with this stuff. We build with it all the time at Georgian and with our companies. So what we see and what I know our lab works with our companies on is like real technical leadership matters as people get super enthusiastic. We have lots of members, for example, on my team, on the investment team, they're coding away at workflows and productivity tools and pulling stuff into Slack that gives us everything we want right in front of it. And it's really cool. They're like some really good productivity enhanced stuff. But risk comes when the novice like me relies solely on AI assisted code for bigger changes or stuff that's important for an enterprise, well, or even a professional coder relies entirely on AI assisted. That's where you're going to run into trouble, and this technical debt over time becomes this time bomb that you talk about. There's also tons of security issues, as we've talked about before. There was fairly recently this TAP identity and messaging leak that you probably saw, which is entirely unwind that entirely because it was vibe coded with very little supervision.
And moving more towards personal advice from Steve, the Cyber Builder Toolkit, first principles. If you had to design the perfect Cyber Builder Toolkit based on your own investing experience, what would the 3 core chapters be?
I'd go back a little bit to maybe what I said earlier, because it doesn't change a lot when you've been doing this a long time. You kind of simplify. I think it's, pick a huge, right? Not a large, but an absolutely huge market and expanding market. In cyber, hard to find the white space. But if you take like Cyera, for example, we've been looking at all kinds of components within there, lineage, classification, DLP, whatever. Or started in DSPM, but immediately the view take down access, identity, client, DLP audit. And this is not stuff they're tripping over as they go. This is by design. So when we met them several years ago, it was sort of like, here's what you're seeing right now in market and product, but ta-da, here's where we're going. And that's where the magic is. And that's where you go, wow, that's the market in DSPM was probably big enough, but now it just blows up exponentially larger and they're able to control the movement through that market. So huge market. 2, mentioned it before, team, build the best team, take on that market. If you're a first timer, if you happen to be starting in Israel, you've got probably a lot from the army or military or your network. If you've done it before, the followership is huge. The Mike Fays and Dan Amigas of the world, they've got a funnel, like this that just grows and grows of talent that to follow them into the next business. Then we are seeing patterns around having the very best early investors in these companies. So the best seed, the best A-round investors, there's a bit of a pattern there. So choose the best, raise fairly often, just go out and dominate that market, and then get those investors hustling for you. There's some great firms out there. There's some great combos. So look at the alchemy of who you're bringing into the business and just get them working every day. All the companies we've talked about on this podcast, they work their investors as they should, and the investors work hard for them because they know these are their breakout winners. This is what returns funds.
Absolutely. And then going into your own journey, I know you've been with Georgian for 16 years, and then before that, you have extensive sales and biz dev experience. Was there an impactful mentor, maybe a bit of mentorship advice that you've gotten along your own journey?
I've never really had one. I wish I had a good answer for that and just said it's like this person. I really haven't. I hope if you talk to the founders I work with my team, I think I'm known to have a strong work ethic. Kind of probably you'd put me in that kind of grinder sort of persona, jump in on anything, roll up my sleeves, help out. So if I would credit anyone, I think probably my parents. So my parents worked very hard to get to Canada and raise the family here and give us all great starts. And so I think I would give a nod to my parents there.
That's the best answer. And going into the ups and downs of investing, what keeps you motivated and what keeps you resilient?
Another bit of a cliche answer, but working with the team that we have here at Georgian, we have that lab, which is a lot of generally younger people, but incredibly motivated, building new things. Like they get supercharged out of it because they get to work with our companies on the latest and the coolest tech. And we learn from them every day. So they help us pick the markets, they help us do the diligence. And, my team's incredibly dynamic. But the entrepreneurs, like you just never, this is the best job in the world in many ways, working with these entrepreneurs who are building incredible things using this tech. And for me, it's not like the tech. I mean, I'm blown away with what the tech can do, but it's what they're choosing to do with the tech. I mean, this week I was in San Francisco. I was with Lou and Clarence and Brandon from Risk IQ, which was a company from a previous fund. We had a great income with Microsoft, and I got to sit down with, and it's unbelievable. It's so cool what they're doing. So, that keeps me super motivated. We'll never want to retire from any of that.
100%. And of course, you have the best job in the world, but I know you're in Toronto. What is something that you do to recharge, just to get yourself going sometimes outside of work?
So where I'm sitting now is my farm. This is the happy spot. I actually took a snowmobile to work today, down to my barn office here. But I like mechanical things. So and actually kind of old tech is what I like. I love working on tractors and motorcycles and combustion engines. And I'm a big family guy, so I've got two boys. One is doing mechanical engineering, so he likes dealing with old tractors and building go-kart and stuff. And the other one is going into finance. Neither of them were approached by me in any direction, but they figured that out on their own. So a lot of family time here, and we love skiing. We're a big skiing family.
I think that's a great answer because I remember reading that a lot of times in terms of tech, we tend to think of software, but the original tech was railroads, tractors, boats, things of that nature. So we tend to get away from that at times, only thinking about software. And then kind of touching on it, my last question for you before going back to Yossi, if you weren't investing in cyber companies, what completely non-tech profession do you think you'd pursue in an alternate universe?
I mean, it's a direct threat from what we were just talking. I think I'd be a farmer. So I love growing things. I like tech, and there's a lot of tech in modern farming, but small farming would get a lot of satisfaction, I think, working the fields right out there. So we have a real farmer who does it, but I would happily take that over as a gig.
No, perfect answer. And we're all once farmers. So, going back to those roots, those core roots. Perfect.
There you go.
Uh, Absolutely. Yes. Steve, thank you very much for the great answers. Pinning back to Yossi.
So, Steve, it's been really a pleasure hosting you, and we're really looking forward to release the episode. So, thank you so much for joining us today, and for everybody else that joined us. Stay tuned for the other upcoming episodes with guests like President of Cisco, President of ServiceNow, and others. So, it's going to be interesting. And thank you so much.